Afternoon, everyone, for joining. Once again, we do apologize for the delay, but we're here now, and so for the sake of time, we're going to move expeditiously. Is Paolo still going to say something, or do you want me to just go right into it?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me? Yes, thank you. Again, apologies because it looks like the technical glitch which delayed us came on my end, unfortunately. But we fixed it, and again, apologies for the late start. But since we're late, let me just be extremely brief. My name is Paolo von Schirach. I am the president of the Global Policy Institute and chair of political science and international relations at Bay Atlantic University. We're really happy to have this opportunity to contribute, I hope productively, to this national dialogue that has erupted, unfortunately, under very sad circumstances. You know the facts. I don't need to explain them to you. But here's the thing. America, if we want to go back down to basics, was born under some auspices, very lofty and very beautiful: freedom and the protection of individual freedom, equal justice for all, and equality of opportunity. These are the pillars, I would say, of the lodestar of America. Well, guess what? This may exist, but not for all. And the events of the last few weeks have unfortunately brought this home. Not just because a man was brutalized and killed, but that by police, we all know that. But this also has allowed us to dig into other realities of unequal access to justice and certainly unequal opportunity. So this is not something we're going to resolve today, but hopefully constructively working together, we can try to make some progress. This is our duty as a nation. We are a rich nation. We are very resourceful. So what lacks here is focus and will and the ability to recognize the depth of old problems that are with us and that have been unfortunately ignored far too long. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to my friend and colleague Gina, who will moderate the event, and thank for all of you, audience and panelists, for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Paolo. Thank you, Paolo. Once again, my name is Gina Rupert. I am the Career Services Coordinator here with Bay Atlantic University. And I just want to welcome everyone for this afternoon. Once again, apologize for the delay. So we will move right into our discussion. What I'm going to do is just introduce everyone by their name, and then I'll let you to talk about what it is that your organization is doing and anything else you may want us to know. So I am pleased to be here with Dr. Kimberly Muktarian, who is the Executive Director of Save Our Sons, Johnnie Bond, Esquire, Attorney at Law, and Tyler Cargill, our Director of Diversity and Inclusion here at Bay Atlantic University. And we also have one of our graduate students online, Mr. Muharrem. So I want to thank everyone for joining today. So Dr. Kimberly, if you wouldn't mind, just tell us a little bit about your organization and what it is that you do.
Well, my name is, again, Kimberly Muktarian, and I am the president of Save Our Sons. And what we do is we collaborate to prevent incarceration by development in our community. We also deal with reentry, and we also deal with public policy that shapes or creates communities that would send our young men to prison. So we do advocacy, education, and prevention.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bond?
Yeah, first of all, I wanted to thank you all, Bay Atlantic University, for putting this on. I think it's a very important issue that we need to discuss, and I think it's very important that we talk about and we take action. So thank you all. Thank you, Gina, for hosting this hosting this conference, this discussion. Johnnie Bond, I started my law practice, the Bond Law Firm, in 2006. My practice was born out of a passion for civil rights, as well as helping victims and people who've been victimized by what can often happen in a capitalist system where companies are encouraged to make profits but at the expense of people. And also any negligent behavior that harms people for no fault of their own. Over the years, I've been able to participate in some consumer protection lawsuits against Wells Fargo for their redlining practices and their subprime lending. We have a case that's currently pending. Also do a host of cases for personal injury where people have been injured. So my practice is focused on helping people who are being injured and victimized. And in this situation, we clearly see the Black Lives Matter movement has brought this issue to light to an incredible degree, and it's upon us in all of our respective fields to step up and move this issue forward, so that what we're seeing is that the cry "enough is enough" actually results in it's enough and it's over.
Thank you. Muktarian, are you online? You might share with us. I know you're a graduate student here at BAU, but a little bit about your background and anything else you can add.
Sure. Again, my name is Muharrem Kulak. I have been in DC area since 2016. So the first, before I came to the United States, I was graduated at Istanbul University in Istanbul, Turkey. And my background was the business administration. And thanks to the Bay Atlantic University, I finished my MBA program last year. And my major is entrepreneurship, again about the business. I have been here like 4 years, and I would like to share my perspective also. Right now, I'm trying to do a YouTube channel. I'm working on it because so many people in Turkey, they ask me like, what's going on in the United States? Like, so many people are wondering what's going on, because media in Turkey also dependent. How come? Like, dependent some of they don't explain all of the things. So they really need one Turkish speaker who can explain in their language and what's going on in the United States. So I made one video about it actually, and also I am editor about one platform online they call Yeni Arayış. It's about the digital media. So I also wrote one article about what's going on in the United States and how the Black lives important matters for us. And this issue actually, when we see the US history, it has been like long time, and most of time they just close it. I mean, they don't solve it. Like, that's my point. Why people are not speaking up enough and solve the problem instead of cover. That's I think one of the most important. The problem for me, most important part is this. Like, and the second thing, I went to do in front of the White House to see what's going on actually, and I saw so many people there. They are actually protesting to have right to protest. You know what I mean? That's also makes me happy. And because in the beginning, probably you saw that like the tear gas, so many things was going on in the beginning, but after that, people see that like more people are coming. So actually that makes me happy because they didn't give up. So actually we shouldn't give up too.
Excellent. I think absolutely correct. And I want to commend you for taking on the charge to help the narrative that is shared across the world that sometimes is absolutely inaccurate and incorrect. So thank you so much. Tyler, you're up, my friend.
Yes. So I am Tyler Cargill. I am the Director of Diversity and Inclusion here at Bay Atlantic University. Kind of going off of what our guest just said, one of my main goals right here is creating diverse and inclusionary spaces in international environments. And a big part of that is having the conversation on race and other situations with usually underrepresented groups. And actually trying to connect with that in a feasible way where they understand not just the reasoning, but the emotion behind that. And currently with racism and inequality regarding that is one of the most difficult concepts for me to explain to international students, because they can read it, they can understand it, they might have a similar version of it. However, they truly don't understand it. with the last few weeks. I've chatted with students while I've been teaching where they actually start to show the emotion and they're actually explaining. They're like, oh, the light bulbs come on. Because since I think we grew up with it, we grew up with this idea, you know, whether it's a whitewashed version or you're actually part of that community, any of the communities, we know it on more a day basis, whereas people aren't familiar with it. And that also extends to faculty, staff, anybody. I start just like getting my soapbox out and just start preaching and educating. But that's currently everything from me. Back to you, Gina.
Perfect, thank you. And Tyler, we do appreciate your amazing work, what you're doing with BAU students, staff, and the community at large. It's a major undertaking once again, so thank you. I want to ask everyone how they were feeling today in the midst of, we're in a pandemic. And once again, we witnessed African-American male lose his life to Minneapolis police officer. So we all know the story. As Paolo suggested, we don't need to continue to go down that rabbit hole, because the goal is to have some positive dialogue and how we can move forward. So I'm going to start with you, Dr. Kimberly, if you don't mind. Share with us, talk to us about, as a leader, you've been doing advocacy work in the community. How are you now leading your organization and at this moment, and what resources are currently being provided or programs have been implemented? We can't hear you. We can't. Uh-oh. Not sure if she heard me.
Hello?
All right, great. Yes, there you
Okay.
are.
Sorry, I was saying that you could only unmute me. So where are we now as an organization? We're making demands to city, state, and federal officials to move along the COVID issue, as well as the issues of mass incarceration and anything that has anything to do with prevention. Policy, police brutality issues as far as body cameras. We were essential in making sure our city received $4 million in body cameras 2 years ago after a shooting. And so we've been solicited by other cities to help implement those policies across the board. Because as you all well know, the way we saw George Floyd was Minneapolis body cameras from citizens. And so we want to make sure that that is something that's implemented across the board. We also are asking for more funding for programs for local citizens versus reactionary police implementation. If we can start pushing our community to become more present in the services that our own people are providing, then we can again become a community and build resources in ourselves and spread abroad. So we're looking at more of an organic movement of natural resources within our community. So our community can have something to strive to. And some are, some college, and some also need trades. And so we're trying to make sure we utilize and not have any breakage any of those links right in our own communities.
Okay, thank you. We're having some audio feedback, so I do apologize. I'm not sure if that's on our end or on your end, but I think
I can hear you all perfectly.
Okay, perfect. So, so no, that's great. Thank you for sharing that with us, and it's very important. There was a point in time where I worked in the league with incarcerated adults, and it's very passionate work to do. So I just want to once again commend you on the work that you're doing and working with young African-American males. So they, at such a young age, they have to learn how to be a man before their time to be a man, just if they're ever stopped by the police or any authority they view as someone in law enforcement, even in uniform. That could just be very intense and it's scary for some. So thank you for the work. Sounds like you've had a very robust dialogue with your clients, team, constituents, and appreciate that. We wanted to keep that momentum going. Just want to pivot here a little bit to Tyler, since he is our diversity and inclusion guru. Tyler has been very active in the protests here in DC. He's been protesting like it's his second job. But I want to talk to you, Tyler, and ask you a very direct question. How do you, as a person of non-color, begin to have this conversation with your peers, your demographics, and so that they understand the importance of Black Lives Matter? As you suggested, this is not, or someone suggested earlier, this isn't anything new in the United States. It's been ongoing. You and I have had conversations being from the Midwest, living in the South. So how does that conversation begin to take place, and how does it shape, and being in education with working with international students, but just what does that look like in your opinion?
I mean, when it comes to my opinion, like backstory on me is I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in a 128-mile square school district. I only had one Black student in my class, and he was from a mixed race family whose family had taught him to act more Caucasian. Now, I didn't really experience a community like that, so I grew up thinking I was very open, welcoming, etc. Until I went to University at Southern Mississippi. I know, flip change right there. But down there, then I realized I didn't know as much as I thought I did, and it was the first thing for me to admit. So my first thing is always realizing, I think as an ally, is you admit that you don't know everything, and you need to learn to be opening for that. Because, you know, what you might think and what we might think, or what we've established as a dialogue or a base for conversations differ for another. A great example is when it comes down to understanding race. Like if I'm going to explain it to students, if I start going to my anthropological background, race does not exist as a social construct, but yet I did forensics as my previous job, and we used race as a way to identify skeletal material. So then it's like, well, then you have to explain that. So realizing, I think, that there's a base knowledge and being able to say, like, okay, this is how I understand it, what's wrong, because this is how I've used it. Okay, it's different. So that's one thing. I would say the other thing when it comes to students, faculty, staff, anybody I've encountered at the school or outside, is realizing that you have biases, whether they're internalized, whether you've realized them and you're working on them. For example, my white privilege, understanding how I'm privileged in certain aspects was what I had to undergo. And it really wasn't until I moved to DC where I can meet other people, primarily queer and trans individuals of color, where I could kind of start to even, not understand it, like understand it, but understand it better. So having that understanding and going to a student that understands race, I'm using this because that's my anthropological background there, sorry. Understanding race in that situation and trying to get them to understand the emotion and the more impact of it. That's how I approach and go and say, okay, if you understand this, let's talk about biases, because I would say that's one of the bigger things people don't realize. And an example, if I may, of having students that don't quite understand races. I had two students a year ago. They were from Turkey. One was more brown skinned compared to the white individual, European, etc. They were walking in DuPont, and a cop came and started harassing one of them. I'll let you guess who. And they didn't understand it. They're like, well, why was this happening? And I was like, well, we have to have a conversation. So then it kind of opens their eyes up. So for me, I try to, like, when it goes forward, do the emotional aspect and see how they respond. Bring up, like, you know, be open to, like, making mistakes and having clarification. Understand your biases and so forth. That was a lot. I'm sorry.
Oh, that was great. No, that's important. And you touched on a couple of things that people just don't know, and the reality is just ask, because as a person of non-color, you may not ever understand our struggles, the plight that we go through, and we just ask. And so with that question, I'm going to pivot just a little bit to Johnnie. Johnnie, as a man of color, born in the South and live in DC as an attorney, how has clearly the color of your skin impacted you to move? You're a highly educated person, but you could have been Mr. Floyd, you could have been, you know, Aubrey, you could have been so many other people. How does that impact you? You're out here doing the work, you're on the front lines, and yet and still, here we are having this conversation 50 years later. So just talk to us a little about, I just want your perspective because you are a man of color on the panel and another man of color, I should say, on the panel. And I just want your perspective and know, really talk about how you are feeling. I mean, that, you know, I was emotional. I've just been overwhelmed. It's been very emotional. We've been here at BAU, out with the protests. We have a huge banner, Black Lives Matter. It's just been a lot. So just want to hear from you. I want the audience to hear from you. You need to unmute.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Gina, for the question. You know, first of all, I'd like to say this is an amazing panel because we have so many different perspectives. My perspective coming from the South, you know, I can speak to this issue, I believe, and as I've had more and more conversations with my white colleagues and people who are more interested in this subject than they've ever been, I'm noticing that race has shaped every facet and aspect of my life because it's always been a front issue. Navigating the South, which had a history, obviously, of slavery, then Jim Crow, segregation, civil rights battles, and then even moving on from there, there's always been a constant struggle, a constant process of trying to move things forward and to, you know, play your part in that, as well as to try to operate as if it does not prevent me or anyone else from achieving what we want to achieve. So, but then my personal response to it in my education in terms of from philosophy and mathematics to law, I have been seeking a way to live a life that is part of the answer to this issue. Practicing law in the areas that I practice, being and speaking out on issues that I think are very pertinent to this issue. It's shaped every facet of my life. So I've had conversations with some of my white friends who said that, you know, they never even have to think about race. And that's a clear distinction. When you don't have to think about it, you can ignore it if it does pop up occasionally. It tends to pop up for them during, you know, elections when it becomes a central issue. So that's my background. That's my for me. I've always been thinking about this issue. It's always been in my face. And I think that's the case for African Americans in the U.S. and abroad, right? Black people abroad. How do I feel about it? I've got so many feelings. I have so many emotions, so many thoughts. This is such a highly layered, multifaceted issue, ranging from economics, macro and microeconomics, ranging from criminal justice to police reform, prison reform, the history of the laws for fighting drug wars and criminalizing. I mean, it's a large issue in my mind, in the way I think about it. I'm going to try to distill it, but I mean, look, you see George Floyd, and my first initial emotion was anger. And it was anger from a different perspective than I had ever had before, because to me, it seems like it's been an escalation time and time again with multiple killings each year since President Obama was elected. We've got, you know, we can go back to Rodney King in 1991, Oscar Grant, which probably, you know, people forget about, 2009, shortly after Obama was elected. I mean, that was a very heinous crime. I mean, if we saw that happen today, in which the police officer, while they were arresting him, shot him in the back in broad daylight, we probably have a similar situation today. This has happened time and time again. The Black Lives Matters movement sprung out of Trayvon Martin's heinous murder and the fact that the Zimmerman was acquitted. And that's a huge issue that we're dealing with. It's like these things happen, but we know no policemen have been convicted. There's no accountability. There's no response on that end, and the injustice of that will create the boiling point, and has created the boiling point that we're at right now. My major concern at this point is, will the response equal the boiling point? Because that is what's most important right now. There's very little hope that it's going to come from the highest elected official in this country, President Trump. There's very little hope that it's going to come from, that there will be an acknowledgement from him and his base in this very divided political environment we're in. But it has to be something done. And we have to see some reform. I know that the Democrats have introduced the Justice and Policing Act. I'm hoping that, there can be some bipartisanship effort on that. But we know that, we can expect that, as has been done in many elections before, race will continue to be an issue to divide the United States and to win an election by one party, the Republican Party. As long as race continues to be a tool in the elections to divide people, we'll never get rid of the problem. We'll never have this issue. We'll never get rid of this problem. So, like I said, I am all over the place right now in terms of like all of the things that I'd like to see happen. I hope that, this Justice and Policing Act can actually bring about some change. I think we need to pay attention to that issue. I think we need to look and educate ourselves about the Black Lives Matter movement. I think that what they've done has been extraordinary in making the very simple fact that Black Lives Matter a central issue and a statement that everybody now, particularly whites who are now very clearly focused on this issue, are able to say and tell their friends and tell their others and tell people who don't agree with them right now, yes, Black lives do matter. So, I'm not sure if I answered the question, Gina, but, those are my emotions, kind of raw, and some of my hopes. And I also hope that the United States can come together despite the fact that Donald Trump will attempt to use race and any other issue as dog whistling and gaslighting to divide the country, and use this to get reelected, which I think is sad, and the lack of leadership that we've had from the White House. But I'm hoping that we can, as we've seen through these protests, we can unite without him and move this issue and hopefully get this resolved. If not with this election, if not with this this new act, more laws that will be introduced, more reform that can happen at the state and federal level. Because I think if we don't deal with this now, if we don't deal with this within the next, as a result of this, we are going to get further torn apart on this issue. And I don't think that that's what America stands for.
Thank you. I appreciate your candor, your honesty, and it's okay to feel the way you feel. We all have some feelings and emotions around this. It's just ongoing. It's been too long, and it's just interesting how now that the country is and the world is coming together to say enough is enough. Is it solely because of the racism, which is a machine of itself? Is it because of the lack of, as you said, leadership based on the person commander in chief? Could be various reasons, but people are just tired.
Right.
Blame it on COVID-19 if you want to, but people are tired. People are tired for numerous reasons. A life is a life. Doesn't make a difference if a person is black, white, gay, straight, brown, purple, young, old. A life is a life. And when people are just killed unnecessarily because someone thinks they can get away with it, that's problematic for all citizens. And I do mean all citizens. It will come knocking on your doorstep at some point in time. So thank you for that. Muharrem, I just want to hear from you. What I know you're doing the work and you want to really put forth the effort to change the narrative as you're educating individuals in Turkey. But how do you feel race plays into that, or not even understanding? Tyler alluded to or suggested that, or not suggested, gave an example of two individuals who are from Turkey slight skin difference and how clearly one of darker complexion was harassed. Yeah, talk to us a little bit about how people internationally or just in Turkey perceive that, and how do you think your voice can be used to remedy that?
He'll have to be unmuted, Gina, I believe.
Oh. Denise, can you unmute him?
Yeah. I think right now you hear me, right?
Oh, yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much for giving me opportunity to speak up. Actually, I have been here 4 years, and this 4 years, I have only one time got racist attack. It was not physical. It was by talking. It was just one. It was actually in the building of the Bay Atlantic University. I don't know who is that person, but that was 2 years ago. I was just used the elevator to go down, and one person was in the elevator already. He just like pushed me a little bit with the physical. I was like, wow, I'm sorry. Like, he said, oh, you just, how can I say? You just stepped my, stepped my shoes. That was the new shoes. I was like, oh, I understand that. Like, he's trying to tease me. I was like, okay, I'm sorry. I don't want trouble. But I cannot fully understand how you feel because you live in this land and I have been only here just 4 years. But as an international student, as a Turkish person, I would like to say if we learn how to respect each other, everything will be better. My wife, I met in the United States. I'm married with that beautiful lady, and she's Christian, she's Catholic, and I am Muslim. And I got some criticism by that. I say, you're a different religion, you believe different. That's okay. I know, we pray different, but we respect each other, we love each other. That's how beautiful you are. That's why they like United States, all the different people are coming together. And I think we all need to learn the respect to each other and love each other. That's the solution. And other thing, I know, I just researched a little bit, how can I become a police officer? How many months we need for that? Like police academy, 5 months, but for my opinion, I think after this, we should I'm not the person who say that, but maybe every year we need to check the police officers mentally and physically. Like, are they still okay to continue? For example, I'm an international person. Every year I have to go to the DMV to renew my driver license. So what if the police officer has a program like this? Every year they can go check to the police officer. Are they mentally and physically continue to their work? For example, after a while, when you get old, they check your glasses. Are you able to see the road? You go to DMV, you renew your driver license. As like this, I think they also should check the police officer mental and physical skills. That person, I think he has been police officer 20 years, and he like who killed the George Floyd. And when I watched the video, I was like, wow, that's too much. Like, I feel sad. First of all, I feel so sad. Then I feel a little bit angry because that's too much. I mean, the person has no gun, nothing, no physical attack, nothing. He just waiting, and he just said like, I cannot breathe, and you're still pushing. Like, why? That was too much for me. And I think it's going to affect also education in the United States. Who wants to come from the abroad? Like, as an international person, can you imagine, for example, this summer, maybe I decided to come to the United States from Turkey. I watch all the media, social media, and I said, you know what? Maybe not the United States. Maybe I should choose Canada. Maybe I should choose London. Maybe I should choose different. So this is going to affect all of it. And also the COVID-19 also was the biggest problem also before this. And hospital, like, I'm scared as an international person. I'm scared to go to the hospital because it's so expensive. Like, you have to have Insurance, if you don't have insurance, basically that's the other issue. That's a lot of, like, that's huge amount bill. I have one friend who lives in New York. He's also Turkish. He got the COVID-19. His test was positive. He stayed only 2 days, 2 or 3 days, I don't know. Couple days in the hospital. He got recovered. They sent it home, and the bill was around $200,000. I was like, wow. As an international student, that's insane, you know. Well, you know what I mean. So, well, I was scared. I'm scared actually, but I am also happy to live in this country because people are still fighting for freedom. People are still protesting. They don't give up. So it makes me more stronger that, you know, wow, I'm really, really happy to live in this free country. But I hope everything will be much more better soon. And I hope we will not choose the people by the color, by the religion, by just the network. Because when I choose a friend, I am not looking like, you know, oh, you know, I'm not looking to color. I'm not looking to race. I'm not looking to religion. I'm just looking to person as a friend. And I show my respect. And if the person accept my respect and my friendship, and here you go, we are friends. You know, I cannot, I mean, I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts to share. I'm just seeing as an international person, and that's why I'm sharing this. And that's the other thing, like at the job situation, they ask the race, like, are you Latino? Like, you know, are you white, African American? Like, I was like, that's the first time when I applied the job, I was like, why they are asking this? Like, what is matter? You know, and the last question, one of the last question is like, are you Latino or not? Are you Hispanic or not? And that was bothering me in the beginning. I was like, why they are asking those questions? Like, we never ask this question in Turkey, like, you know. But of course, there are a lot of people living in the United States. I really hope peace, respect, and love to everyone.
Well, I appreciate your optimism. I don't know where that world exists, but hopefully one day we can get there. Maybe not in this lifetime, but soon. You made a comment about the video witnessing this man's death. I don't know any other way to put it. And if we all had 8 minutes and 46 seconds, someone applying pressure to our neck when we are handcuffed, and like, that's scary. So Dr. Muktarian, talk to us briefly about, you work with the population that is targeted every single day of their lives, and them seeing that video, I'm sure it infuriates them, it empowers them, it angers them, but where are some of these young men now? How are they able to move forward in life? And that, I'm sure, is making your job as executive director and your team and other CBOs just makes it much more difficult, because you're trying to empower them to move through something, but it's just constantly being reinforced, thrown in their face, and then for basically the entire world to witness this man be murdered. How are you able to offer any hope, any positive reinforcement that they won't be next? I mean, there's no guarantee, but what's the dialogue?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
First of all, let me say again, thank you for bringing this panel together, because addressing the issues and acknowledging the issues is the first step to freedom. I think for so long, America have ignored what they've always seen. And I think this video of George Floyd was just a huge eye-opener. It doesn't mean that it was not always there, because we've always had these young men that I deal with who tell their stories every day. I think America chose to ignore it. And from that, they became neglectful to their own citizens. What this has done is freed many of our men from the psychological oppression. From now they are being heard. Now they're being believed. And I think they put themselves in the shoes of Colin Kaepernick when, some months or years ago, the world was throwing tomatoes, and now they're having to go and pick them back up. And so that is speaking volumes, and it's a release for many of them, because America uses a lot of propaganda to use words such as, you know, one nation under God, and we're all in this together. And we, you know, we've heard the propaganda over and over and over again, but the reality is we were very divided. We were very disconnected from each other. And this brings us to a place where we have to view this same, or witness what happened through the same lens. We can't even view this through the lens of race anymore. Everyone saw it together. And I think this helps tremendously with the cause of humanity.
Thank you. I agree. The lens is definitely, we're constantly adjusting the lens. And
Yes.
I don't know how many more times we can adjust before, you know, it's
Yeah.
clear and focus for some of us, and for some people, maybe a little hazy, but how much more? I think that's what's happening. I think I'm going to ask the question to everyone. I'll come back to you, Johnny, so don't think. But as many of you know, various companies and organizations have released statements of support of Black Lives Matter. In your opinion, what does accountability look like, and who are we holding accountable? So, Johnny, with respect to law and legislative, who are we holding accountable?
Well, I think right now the focus is, you know, for an initial response, the focus, rightfully so, is attempting to change policing. That seems to be the first layer of this, because it speaks to George Floyd's death. It speaks to all of the police shootings, and you know, it's an approach starting at the top, as we saw with Ahmaud Arbery. He was murdered by not even cops. I mean, there were people who felt like they could grab their guns and go out like vigilantes and hunt this man down. If we have the level of accountability, as you're asking about, at the top level with the police, and that's communicated throughout the country, that may be a way to bring not only the police, individual police officers, but people who also look to law enforcement as a means to communicate what should and what should not be done in response to alleged crimes or criminal behavior. I think that's where things should start, but we've got a larger issue to address, and that's race. So you know, we could attack it one issue at a time, and I think that's a very practical way to do it. But the conversations we're having right now to hold ourselves accountable, to hold our friends accountable, to hold people accountable who have certain views, whether they say them or not, the way they act, the way they treat other people. We have to hold ourselves accountable, hold our neighbors accountable. And that is the way we change this larger issue of race. I would love to think that we could resolve the race issue, but I know as human beings, there's a chance if we resolve a race, you know, we'll find something else to divide us. The issue is, can we as human beings rise to the higher level of total self-respect, empathy for our fellow man and woman as equals, true equals? Can we rise to that occasion? Can we do it out of the result of this incident? Can we do it on a personal level? Can we do it as a nation, as a country, as an example to the entire world? That's the real challenge. And holding ourselves accountable to that larger issue is what I think has to come into play into this discussion. Because race, as long as it's used to divide us, as I said earlier, it'll always be used as a form to arrest power, to maintain a status quo, or to manipulate the population. If we can remove that as a race of people, as a species, there'll be no profit in it. So that's a larger issue. Holding our friends accountable. And right now, it's going to be very important to hold these officers accountable. We cannot escape the reason why this issue is so poignant right now. George Floyd was murdered in broad daylight by an officer whose left hand was in his pocket very casually, as if he was waiting on some food delivery or his McDonald's order. That can't happen. It has outraged the world. However did we get to that point? You'd have to look at this issue as a historical point. You'd have to look at what's going on in Minnesota in particular. But it's the same issue. It's the same issue. It's the devaluing of one human being as a result of their color, their skin, or whatever reason. And this has to stop. So, one thing I would like to throw out there, I think the political power of the police and the police union starting to come up. And I think, not only Congress passing legislation, but I think if the police union can hold their members accountable on a certain level, and I don't have any policy ideas on that, that's a certain, that they have to think about how they could do that. But if there is an interest there, I believe that the police unions could get involved to hold their members accountable. Nobody wants to lose any union benefits for any of their actions. So that may be an effective tool to stem some of this. And obviously we've got to vote. That's going to hold our politicians accountable, impact the judges that are appointed, impact the leaders that we have. We've got to vote, and we've got to get involved at the state level as well as the federal level.
Definitely agree. Definitely agree. Thanks for your response. Real quick, Tyler, what is your opinion about accountability? Because we are with BAU as an international university, you as a Caucasian male, what does accountability look like?
Well, first off, Johnnie, whoa, well said. I wrote down like a whole bit on there because I was just taking notes because I was like, love it. Exactly. I really would like to address two parts. I kind of want to build off what Johnnie said regarding holding ourselves accountable. That starts there, but also holding our friends, your white friends, I'm not going to beat around the bush, holding them accountable, and your colleagues. I think when professional friends, family, I've sadly know a lot of friends who have cut ties with their family. And it's sad, but there is a breaking point because there is a time when you just can't get through to them socially. As a gay queer man myself, I am I'm still high on the privilege scale, but I'm still also looked down upon. And, trying to be able to connect that way is always a really good stepping stone. And so when I do have these accountability talks, I'm kind of curious. For example, last week, as Gina said, I've been protesting all week. This is a protest outfit. This is the hat, the t-shirt. We're going in a little bit. But I was walking back on 17th, and I saw friends outside of a bar, social distancing. And I asked them, well, why are you guys here? And they said, oh, we don't really know what to do. This is 2 weekends ago, sorry. Oh, the cops says we shouldn't head down yet. We should wait. And I'm like, that's kind of the problem. Like, why aren't you down there? You guys are a gay married couple of 10 years. Like, why aren't you down there? And that bothered me, really bothered me. Because once again, it's like, well, we got equality. We're good. No, we're not. So I think once again, is holding those accountable and having the conversation. This is social. We're getting to your point in a second, Gina. But it's holding them accountable. Another thing is I had a friend call me at 11:30 p.m. last week. And I grew up with her, cradle to grave. She was in the bed. We were born 2 months of the day apart. She was in the hospital room when I was born. She still lives in Ohio. She called me and she's like, Tyler, I have an epiphany to share with you. I'm like, well, what is it? She's like, I was getting ready to drive down, show you how country I am. She's getting ready to drive down the golf cart to go down 2 miles to go take care of the horses. And I was like, okay. And she said her boyfriend said, you should take the cooler out. We had beer in that. And she's like, I won't get pulled over, but yeah, let's take it off. And she was driving and she's like, I thought about if I got pulled over, yeah, it would be kind of bad. But if I was a black person and I got pulled over, that might be it. And she's like, and then she started talking. I'm like, you finally realized your privilege and you have to keep this and keep it going. That leads me to the second. I think professionally, everybody fights tooth and nail to get where they are. But when you aren't able to check your your privilege or think you're working with certain people, especially in diverse environments. Like our school here, I was talking to my old professor earlier in Mississippi, and they have merged their departments, and now they're in world studies. And you're working with certain people, you need to hold the staff, the directors, the presidents, the provosts, the vice provosts, I mean, your barista, you need to hold them all accountable for their actions, because actions say loud. You need to lead by example. And if you're doing something and people are telling you, don't do this, we need to do this, especially if they're part of that community, you need to listen, because that's going to advance your company's goal. It's going to advance your everything. But more importantly, I think it's going to advance you personally. And when you can advance personally, you can then police and patrol, well, so to speak, police and patrol other people's actions and accountability. I think without that, and honestly having that real talk with yourself and saying like, do I not know everything? And we have all had leadership where we've done ourselves in our positions. Like we smile, we say, oh yeah, I got that. You run your computer, do the research real quick, because you want to check, you want to be prepared. But sometimes we're so used to that, we just stop and we're kind of like, I'm not quite sure what to do. Let's wait and see what happens. No, this is not that time. You need to do action. I mean, literally, I brought 2 protest boards I'm going to post on the wall, one for Black Trans Lives Matter, because this is a momentum where you have to keep going, and right. You need those people and those leaders to see what you're doing and acknowledge it. Sorry, that was a passionate talk I wasn't expecting. Johnnie got me riled up. Johnnie got me excited.
Listen, no one needs to apologize. I want open, honest dialogue and candor. And I think, to your point, Tyler, people are fearful. When I mean people, I grew up in a predominantly white area. And so, but they would ask questions. Even now, I want people to ask questions. Same breath, I can't be that token person. I don't know everything. I know my experiences, but I think, myself, Johnnie, Dr. Kimberly, we can't be the token for this, large community which we're a greater part of. In terms of accountability, I do check some of my friends who are from the South, and they can be very, let's say, opinionated when it comes to people that don't necessarily look like them. But that's understandable if you have heard stories from your grandfather or you've witnessed things growing up. I mean, the reality is, the civil rights movement is probably not even 60 years old yet. So we are still living and being oppressed simply because of the color of skin. We, as African Americans, now I'm going on a tangent, we have done everything we're supposed to do. Go to school, get a good job, do this, do that. And we can't move into certain neighborhoods. We can't go into certain stores. And if you don't believe me, look at Oprah Winfrey. Her maids was like, no, ma'am, you can't come in here. You have people to go into, they could probably, I don't know, JC could probably go into Gucci and buy up the whole, but they are still being challenged simply because of the color of their skin. And to your point, Tyler, everyone laughed at Colin. People did not support that man. And now you have the NFL who's coming under fire. But we know the NFL has been probably a racist entity for, from years. But I digress. Let me just go back on track. So
I have one question, Gina, because I kind of want to hear on their other experiences. Just one thing is, you and I, talking about the token, you and I, how I approach my diversity job is I'm an ally. If I'm not a direct member of that community, I want to plan and I want those people involved. When I've done seminars and things, I go and find those members. I'm like, I want to give you this platform. I want to give you this. And Gina and I have worked really well together. I guess for my questions for the other panels, if I may real quick, like, how have you all in that situation kind of teamed up or been collaborative with white colleagues or any other individuals to boost and like actually make progress or even just brainstorm? I mean, we've all done that, just a candid, honest, open, getting different perspectives. I mean, I think that plays a massive role.
No, I agree.
Sorry, I stole your show for a second.
No, you did. That's a great question, because we could just pitch that to Dr. Muktarian. With respect to accountability and with the community-based organization, how do you collaborate with organizations that, support your mission or maybe don't, but how do you just collaborate on different, maybe with homelessness, maybe education, I don't know. So the floor is yours. Enlighten us.
She needs to be unmuted.
Unmute your mic. Oh,
Okay. I'm going to say that it's not always been an easy road, but I think passion will find a way. I've been very fortunate for people to seek me out because I've made myself available to have these hard conversations. And what happens is that these institutions or systems will come to me because they're looking for clarity. They're, you know, what they can't escape is the outcomes of racism. I'm also a middle school educator. And if you look at the patterns of what is going on in with Black children, the suspension rate, the dropout rate, the IEPs, mental dissent, so many different things, and they can't blame it on just education alone. They know there are other factors that are targeting Black students. And so they have to come to reality in so many words. They really want to get down to the nitty-gritty of what's going on with these students. So they'll call me in to have these race relation questions or seminars so that they can give themselves permission to start looking for solutions, because you just can't say the student is bad or the student doesn't want to learn. We have to go a little deeper, and I make myself available for that. And I will give you just a small, I won't say a testimony, but an experience that I had just recently. I was bit by my neighbor's dog, who is a white Marine, and he moved into a Black neighborhood that is gentrified. And he got himself a dog and trained his dog. He put cameras all over his house, and the dog got out and bit me. Well, I was a little fearful of dogs for a while until I went to Lowe's Home Improvement, where some of the people would bring their dogs. And I videotaped, I was just so, you know, bugged out about it. But I had a conversation with the man who brought his dog, and I said, you know, he said, well, ma'am, don't be fearful, my dog doesn't bite. And I just held my breath, but when I got outside, I addressed him and I said, I have no problem with your dog. I have a problem with those who cannot contain their dogs. And he said, ma'am, I'm so sorry. Is this a Black issue? And we had a very long conversation about just dogs in general and how everyone is not the same. But he had no idea that his dog was not supposed to offend. He lived in a world where he almost believed that his life was non-offensive to nobody. And that is a very different place when you feel like your whole existence does not offend anybody. Even your wrong is right. And those are some of the deep conversations that I have with those that are in my sessions about what's right to you could be very wrong to other people. And I think that's what we are coming to now. How do we merge the two? How do we say your reality is killing me?
literally.
Literally, right.
Literally.
Your leisure, your gentrification is killing the rest of Americans, or your institution, your statues is, you know, belittling our value. So, you know, those conversations are very abstract to many of the counterparts that I have to speak to.
Great, thank you. So we're running, trying to wrap this up, but I do have a question. So, Johnnie, the Department of Homeland Security suggests no systemic racism exists in law enforcement. However, history and recent events clearly supports this statement is inaccurate and racism does exist. There's an ensuing debate regarding reform versus defunding the police department budget. Please discuss the pros and cons of the reform versus defunding. And I know it's an add-on. Someone asked a question, do you think, and all the panelists, do you think that police officers should have an evaluation every 2 to 4 months or a little more frequently? So what do you think about that?
All right, so the first is reform versus defund, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then let me make sure the second one is evaluations.
Correct. Someone asked a question specifically.
All right. So yeah, let me talk about the reform versus defund, because I had my own kind of personal struggle with this, and I'll explain exactly the struggle I had, which I think may speak to a lot of different people's struggle. Right now, we are having a passionate response from George Floyd's murder, as well as the countless others who have been murdered at the hands of police. And I think what I had to first come into contact with in my own struggle was that, I pay attention to like the political mood, especially in an election year. And my concern was that this call to defund the police would be fodder for Trump's campaign, as well as the right, to use that as, Democrats and the Black Lives Matter movement is soft on in law enforcement. And then I realized that was kind of the problem in my own thinking. We are so divided as a country that we are now thinking about every issue with a political lens. At least I feel that that's what happened in my thought. And what I decided to do then was look at it from a different standpoint and say, all right, what is the defund police movement? What is that argument? As I read into it, it's layered, but it's more or less an argument to pay attention to the amount of money and resources we're allocating to the police in this current policing state. Over the past decade, all the police officers have been militarized after the Department of Homeland Security came in place. So now we have a highly militarized police force. Their budgets are increased every year. And what I believe the Black Lives Matter movement is saying is that in this current context, let's pay attention to how much money and resources we are giving to this system that is resulting in violent deaths of innocent people. And I think defund, if you think about it as an extreme approach to bring attention to the issue of funding the police, it's an effective way to bring this into the conversation. So in my opinion, I don't think that defunding the police or eliminating the police is an answer, because for a number of reasons that I could kind of run down. I mean, what happens when you have trained policemen who are angry that the Black Lives Matter movement got them fired and they have nothing else to do and they're well trained? What do you do with that population? You'll see a lot of things that you wouldn't want to see. So I don't support defunding police in terms of eliminating police, but I do support the argument, the negotiation tactic, the focus on how much money are we investing to the police, to the criminal justice system in the current environment that's continuing to escalate at a pitch that's harming people and not doing what it's intended to do, which is protect and serve, benefit the public. So I'm more for the reform, but I know that we are now in an extreme environment where the language we use and the approaches we have to capture people's attention and bring issues into light so that we can have a robust conversation and discussion about it. And I would encourage people to, let's not fall into the trap of thinking about everything from this political lens, this heavily politicized environment that we're in. Let's get back to thinking about this as human beings. Are we going to protect our public as human beings, all equal? Are we going to continue to allow these divisions to impact how we discuss things, how we shape policy, how we create laws? I think that's what we need to do. Police evaluations, that's pretty much my point on that. Police evaluations, whatever we can do to hold police accountable, I am for. I think we can have a police force that, however we put it in place, they see a Black person and they don't use extreme force. They don't use brutality to handle the situation. I've seen a number of videos on social media where white men who've been fighting the police and waving knives and swords at them have been, left alone and managed and eventually detained But I know that if it was a black person who was doing the same exact behavior, they'd be shot dead. And we've seen it. They've been shot dead for less. So there's a way to bring them into accountability. We have to figure out, and we have to get into, I think, as I said before, how can the police union make some reforms on that level? How can we do it at the federal level? But then we're going to have a state level that I think people need to stay, pretty in tune to them. And that's where we get into basic, specific jurisdictional issues. We know we have red and blue states now. So some of that will be more a longer battle. But if it's a police evaluation annually, what good is it, Gina, if the guys who are going to review them are their buddies, they brought them up, they've all, covering each other. You'd have to have some independent body. And there has been experience, like some form of that with these police reviewing entities and boards in different cities, but we're still having the same issues. So I think police evaluations are great, but clearly we need something more robust. We need an entire sea change on how we think about policing and how we empower police to act and to do their job.
Great, thank you. And I agree. I don't know if evaluation is 100% necessary, but definitely the accountability factor and making them, and maybe in essence punishing them if they feel their pension is threatened. So it's no different if your supervisor, hey, we need you to come to work on time, and you're like, okay, I need to come work on time, or my livelihood would be threatened. So it's about the same, I think, thought process. Someone asked a question in the chat. So we all know that our dear mayor did a thing last week when she had Black Lives Matter basically painted on 16th Street. And this question opened in on the panel. So some people think they don't understand the significance. Why did that happen? How does this help the cause? That money should be, how's it gonna change how African Americans are treated in this country? So that is open to the panel who wants to address that question.
Sure, I love that question, but I've been talking all this time. I'm gonna let everybody else talk.
I'm gonna address it real quick, just because I had this conversation yesterday. Muriel Brown Bowser. So I think this was when you're a child and you fall and you scrape your knee and you spray some ointment on it, it doesn't stop the injury, it just alleviates. I think this was somewhat of that. She's about to try to pass a $45 million police increased budget. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And I think they're due at the end of the month. Nothing. I'm sorry, she did it. I love it. I think it was just a slap to Trump in the face, because she sent a letter, which I agreed with, asking for him to remove and all these things. He tweeted, because he's an adult, and responded, and she did this. I think it was really good for the weekend, as the big first week of the protest. I'm worried that it's not going to keep the motion going. I think this all feels different from, and speaking to different generations, and I would love to hear from you all, but it doesn't. I think this was a personal thing for her. I think it was a personal thing. Did it unify and did it bring highlights to DC? Yes, I think so. But that's my opinion, and I'm not going to go more on a rant, because then I'm going to get a little bit more upset than I should be about DC's politics and lack of statehood and everything. Johnnie, Kimberly, everybody else.
No, we appreciate your perspective. I've heard some people agree with it, some people don't agree. I think it's just a matter of preference. So it was a question that came up in the dialogue. So I just wanted to.
I like how Black Lives Matter and people altered it because also going off the Johnnie thing about, using language and stuff, defund the police. Yes, I still think they want to defund it. I think a lot of it's more for reform. An example is I posted on Facebook, defund the police. And my friend where I grew up with, once again, was like, we can't do that. They're underpaid. They don't have enough money as it is. And I'm like, you grow up in a rural area. Your police officers might, but you need to Google and look at these type of cities and stuff. So I think language is key. And that was something I think Johnnie brought up perfectly, was that you do need the language. It does need to, what do you say? This is a human issue with a lens, and forgetting what the lens is, forgetting that certain people will perceive it differently.
Right.
I mean, just like when it comes down to protests, riots, looting. And there's been the argument, like I was an article, I think that somebody correct me, the New York Times, where it was, I think it was like an opinion in favor of looting, or maybe of riot, I don't remember, but I remember it was a research article, and they compared it to almost like so many of the American way that we fought for America and different types of progress and stuff. But I think once again, using the words Black Lives Matter is amazing. I just walked through it. There are people there, but when I walked through it earlier, I'm guessing there's less than 300 people.
Right.
When I walked by it earlier today at like noon, and they're taking photos. So now it's become more of a tourist thing. I'm stopping.
Yeah.
Someone else take
Well, yeah, Tyler, I completely understand. I feel what you're saying. Look, there are a number of ways to react to it. I try to take what I can get from things, and my take from it is that in a large way, number one, it solidified the Black Lives Matters legitimacy on a national and world level, which beyond a doubt, that was the most encouraging thing. I mean, it's a plaza, it's a street named after the movement in the nation's capital. It's a huge leap in their achievement in terms of like having a legitimized voice, which it's funny that we have to have people say Black Lives Matter, but that's what we have to do. And so I see this as, and look, I practice law. The way we achieve goals is it's a consistent, continual process to gain the objective. That is a huge step. And, quite frankly, let me tell you, I agree with you on this, Tyler. If they didn't put defund police on the end of that, I don't think I would have saw deeper into the issue that even DC is confronting. So I am 100% with you. We do need to look at what DC is going to do with its increased budget. At the same time, it's the nation's capital. It's a very heavily policed area. I like to have very intellectual conversations about these. Most times my conversations probably wouldn't be fit for mass media because I don't have the one-line thinking. But I enjoyed the entire conversation and analysis of the issue. But that was my main takeaway, and my cheering is like, all right, here's my last point is like, Black Lives Matter to me, it was fledgling at one point. It suffered from, it was a subject to scorn. There's the responses of all lives matter. To me now, with all of this and its legitimate, the legitimacy that was added to it is a huge gift, a huge opportunity to continue the conversation and continue the activism.
I feel like a dinner party, Johnnie, is in order because I want to hear these viewpoints that are not suitable. I think that's great. I think one thing too, because I just remembered, I forgot this earlier, my point, is that I think why Black Lives Matter 2 has finally helped and pushed and everything is that we have Generation Z. And I've debated this with Gina a little bit, is I feel like the millennials are always, the punching bag. We're the ones I feel like when that we started to say, no, we're tired of this. We need support. But with Generation Z, especially growing up with the Trump administration, like when I was out there, I've been out there, when 2 Saturdays ago, when I was flushing people's eyes that had got maced. I have been seeing it evolve peacefully. But what I loved, and almost was like the verge of tears, is looking at these teenagers and college level students and people that are screaming Black Lives Matter and even screaming Black Trans Lives Matter, which is a whole nother issue, but at the same time, it's not. But seeing how these people are evolved and are now saying this, but it's finally the viewpoint. And it's finally, no, they see this. And going out and marching and, seeing everybody, like I had done so much marching. One day I burned 1,000 calories in 7 hours. I was so proud. Did I eat a cheeseburger to celebrate? Yes. But I was doing this as I did and saw different age groups, everything, seeing people on doorsteps with their hands up and their fists up and their signs. And I think that's why this movement is so different, is that it's the kids that are all right. Right. The kids are all right. They're tired, pissed off, but they're ready to fight for it finally. Inequality. I think that's why the movement is, I think everybody really saw that and the nation's media did that, and it's why it was retweeted and everything is growing.
Yeah.
Kimberly,
Absolutely.
I've avoided you. Sorry, if you want to jump in.
We need you to unmute.
I just wanted to say I share your sentiments there in DC. We are yet bombarded here in Raleigh, North Carolina with the same issue about what is the real language now that we are face to face with racism. And I don't know if we ever thought we would get here, but now that we are, how do we, politically correctly address the issue and not be afraid anymore to say racism? And because of Washington, D.C., we also painted our streets. So, as soon as you all finish painting Black Lives Matter, we painted Racism Ends now. So thank you, D.C., for taking that lead. At this point, I'm very unapologetic about the issues. I think the gloves have to come off if we're going to see some movement, and that is what I attribute the young people to. They're out in the streets, they're making it known. Though I've marched with them and I'm probably out of breath at half marked, I will tell you it is exhilarating to see that even when I sit, someone is still standing, because there is so much to fight for, and this beast of racism has been multi-layered. And I'm sure many of you have seen where its tentacles just sort of stretch all over the place in every part of the system. And sometimes when people fight, they don't even know where to start. But here we have common ground that something has to change. And I think that's the exciting part. And I don't know if it's a matter of whether we say defund or reform. I think the policies will do the changing. We see the problems, we change the policies, and from there, it sort of eliminates the need for certain types of actions from the police, as we ask for those policies to change.
Thank you, thank you. So we are at an hour and a half, 90 minutes in, and I'm just very passionate. I have something, we could probably go on for hours. So what I'm going to suggest is that we table this, continue this dialogue. We could definitely, we're going to do more discussions like this in the future. We're going to try to do twice a month, and if you are all willing to come back on, we'd love to hear from you. And this isn't a discussion that you can just have in a short period of time and go away. Someone asked the question, what can be done to avert this cycle that happens generational after, for every generation? That's a loaded question, and that in itself could just be in a topic. So our goal to come together today was to offer some insight about the protest, inequalities and injustice of racism in the United States. And it's okay if you don't understand. I'd rather someone not understand than pretend they understand and they're doing more harm than good. So at least we had a dialogue, start talking to our counterparts, our peers, our colleagues. We have to have the talk. It's a difficult talk. But guess what? For those of you who are parents online, you had to talk about sex with your kids, right? Or your nieces and nephews. It comes a time when, as you said, Dr. Kimberly, enough is enough. We can it will no longer continue to just be, the punching bag. We'll no longer continue just to be disrespected. Enough is enough. It's time that we do something different. Someone else asked a question, which is a loaded question, about what we can do. And I think right now, and this is open to the panel that we'll definitely close out, is now that we have the momentum to literally get your knee off my neck, how do we use this trajectory strategically going forward and within our communities, within, to encourage a full sweep of reform? And Johnnie, you said it best, we have to vote. So nothing can happen, to hell with policies or legislative, excuse my French, if people aren't voting, if people don't feel that their vote will make a difference. And so we have to change that narrative. We have to change that dialogue, that people understand that voting does make a difference. Yes, we're frustrated because clearly people voted and you see what our leadership is looking like, but nothing's going to change unless we vote. So I just want to close out with that question. Just, how do we keep this dialogue going? We can't let it falter. Not now. Momentum is worldwide. So if I can hear from each panelist before we close out, I greatly appreciate it.
I'll start just because I have a few opinions. I mean, just a couple.
Thank you.
I would first say, well, the first one I would say is, I just learned this word, slacktivism, where I didn't know what this was. I was just educated by a friend this weekend, where basically just staying on Facebook and social media, posting and liking and stuff, that's for your own ego boost. That's not enough. Get out there and protest. They still need bodies. I am afraid, I'm guessing everybody is probably too, that this is going to die out. And after everybody that was in DC this weekend, I'm really afraid of that. Like, I'm going to contribute a bit to keep going. I also think a couple of things that need to be done is, one, mental health. I told Gina the day and she was like, what? I had been out all last week personally, except for Thursday. Friday, I laid down at 10:30 at night. I woke up at 11 or 12:38 the next day. I went into a small coma because my body was exhausted. But I think you need to take care of your mental health to keep this fight and the dialogue going. Keep checking people. And more importantly, and this is for everybody, because my friend called me the day about this, if you have been protesting, this is still a pandemic. If you were out at any of the big marches this past weekend, they said to go get tested for COVID around Wednesday or Thursday because it takes 2 days to get the result back. So keep your mask, keep social distancing. I think is more important in the immediate sense. Heart, there you go. I'm not
Heart. We love you. Johnnie, Kimberly.
Yeah. So a few things. I'd say I agree 100% with everything that Tyler said. And, you know, those are two things that I think we did. Unfortunately, this issue kind of dwarfed, but it's all within the reality and environment of COVID pandemic. So that still needs to stay very much a part of our conversation here. Mental health, obviously, something I didn't even think about. So thank you, Tyler, for bringing that up. And the slacktivism is a great word to coin. What can easily be, you know, popular kind of fun means of activism, which will then die out with a flood of other posts on other things. So I do share your concern that this may die out, and I think that's why you asked the question, Gina. But you know, listen, I think we're in a different environment with where we are. I have a fear that it'll die out, but I have no fear that we're at a point where the question of the statement "enough is enough" is real. And I think that has to be heard. And I believe it's not only coming from African Americans at this point, it's coming from voices around the globe. And I think that let's not have fear that this will die out. Let's keep the hope that this will bring about the change that we would all love to see. I had to check myself on that. I had that very fear that this would die out or go back to normal or go back to status quo or just be a phase or a burst of excitement. But I also had to put in view my hope of what I would like to see happen. And I said to myself, how would that feel? How would it feel if there was the change that it was accomplished? How would that feel? And I imagined how that would feel. And I said, all right, I am actually going to hope for this. And I think we should all do that. We should try to figure out how we want to see the world. We should define it clearly and hope very, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay. And hope very strongly, and let that hope fuel all of our activism. Let that hope fuel our conversations with our friends, our colleagues. And I'm with you, Kim. You know, it is a moment where the gloves are off. That's not an advocate. It's not me advocating for violence, but it's advocating for the seriousness of the issue. That can't go down. You know, however we talk about this intellectually or from a passionate, emotional standpoint, this cannot stop. It cannot slow down. It has to pick up. It has to stay constant. It has to stay strong. But we have to do it with the hope in mind. The hope has to be, what do we want to see? I would like to see some real reform. I'd like to see police afraid to take a black man's life for fear that he'll lose his pension, her pension, she'll lose her job, she'll be held accountable, spend time in prison, and then make different decisions. I'd like to see that happen. I'd like to see us really confront this race issue once and for all on a global level and on a human level. That's my hope. I know if I continue to push for it, you know, that seed will grow. Other people may hear us. Other people may take it on, challenge themselves. And that's how things start. And that's how we just have to, like, we've got to use that fuel. Got to use that fuel. And in this environment, it's so easy to get kind of plowed over with this cynical political environment where we have a president who's willing to use it, wield racism as a sword to accomplish the divisions that empower him. And that's, you know, we've got to reverse that trend. And I think we have to do it on an individual level that then grows to larger groups, larger advocacy groups, activism, and conversations. I will say we need to pay attention to justice and policing aspect the Democrats propose. That is a form of activism, lobbying, getting in front of the Republicans who will now have to look at it in the Senate. Obviously, the White House is going to try to come in. Maybe he'll stall it or veto it. I don't know what he'll do, but we have to keep that as a focus for now to accomplish what we can accomplish on the federal level for policing reform, and obviously voting. Yeah, you know, this is we can talk about this on the federal level, but we've got to pay attention to state elections as well. And obviously some of the police departments are governed by local municipalities. So we've got to get involved on the local levels as well. So, I mean, that's what I think we need to do. We need to keep that hope and let that hope fuel our actions going forward.
Thank you, Johnny. Any other comments before we close out? We have like maybe less than 2 minutes. If there's no other comments, I just want to say on behalf of GPI, Global Policy Institute, and Bay Atlanta University, I sincerely appreciate each and every one of you for taking your time to be here today. Hopefully our participants have, hope they leave a little more enlightened. Hopefully they have, as you suggested, Johnny, hopefully they've been filled. Hopefully, you know, they got some steam in their jets, and people are tired and they're ready to do something. So please, we need all hands on deck. I know that it's very trite, but at this point in time, we need all hands on deck. We've seen the injustice and inequalities for so long. And it's just time that we just take the bull by the horns and we start making the changes. If nothing else, please encourage your friends, family to vote. If they're not, make sure they're registered to vote. They have to understand that your vote is important. That's how we impact change. And also, you know, encourage some of your friends and family to maybe do something like this. At family gatherings, I know we're social distancing, but everyone needs a Zoom calls for different things. So just encourage them to, you know, take it to another level and to have the hard discussion. It's okay. You know, racism it's not a dirty word. It is, but it isn't. We're talking about it. So let's continue to have dialogue around it. And once again, we will definitely continue this discussion. Thanks again for coming out and enjoy your day. Everyone, please be safe and be healthy.
Thank you.
Gina.
Thank you.